I'm not happy.
I don't need Elizabeth Warren or the government giving away my money.
Calling Mike Bloomberg an oligarch has implications in this country that I think are unfair and unreasonable.
I care. That's it.
Makes you think of some rich person who got their money off of oil in Russia, who's taking advantage of a broken and dysfunctional system.
Bernie Sanders saying, the country's corrupt, our system's corrupt. Be careful about that language, Bernie. You know, be careful.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
Around the nation, TYT Nation, Jeff Waldorf here. Welcome to the show. We got a great show here on this Wednesday evening or afternoon, depending on where you are. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. I kind of wish it is right now. No. All right, we got a great show for you guys today. So, look, we're going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to dunk on Marco Rubio, as well as Washington Post writer Jennifer Rubin. That's always fun. Then we've got Bloomberg. We're going to talk about what happened at the South Carolina debate. We have disastrous new charts about the middle class. I'm probably sure most of you already know this, but it is nice to have it realized and by a conservative think tank. I know, strange twists. And then we have Joe Biden lying about, well, we've got Joe Biden lying. I know, big surprise. So we've got, like I said, a great show for you guys today. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Very important that you do so. So I guess I want to start off with, I guess something a little bit more, personal to the show. So there was, so I actually had a meeting with my network rep yesterday. And not to get into too much detail, but basically, YouTube is pretty terrible for creators roughly my size and anyone below. And so YouTube is kind of turning into your cable news, and they would rather not have small platforms like us be able to sustain ourselves on their platform, which is why they're switching to, do these alternative methods, because we really don't want to get in trouble for having our ads on independent media. And so the whole part of that story, of course, is to get around to supporting independent progressive media. I know. Once again, I am asking for your financial support as the Bernie Sanders meme, but it's true. We do not survive if we do not have people that support us. So patreon.com/TYT Nation, of course. And then you also have channel memberships. And there's also things like merchandise, t-shirts, mugs, etc. All those are different ways that you can actually help us continue to stay on the air. Very important. If you like independent media, if you want to hear stories and you want to make sure that we continue to actually be able to report on these stories. A good example here is if you mention coronavirus in any story, basically, there's a very good chance that you will get demonetized instantly. Anything that is a tragedy no longer gets monetized. And so it makes it very difficult for news outlets, independent outlets, to actually talk about these issues that are monumentally important. And so that's just, again, another way or another reason that you should support independent progressive media. All right. Anyway, so with that out of the way, let's let's have a little bit of fun with Marco Rubio. All right. During the South Carolina Democratic debate, Marco Rubio was doing a little bit of Twitter commentary and accidentally made the case to elect progressives. Now, let me go to his tweet here. Now, he says, to recap tonight's Democratic debate, if they're elected, you will get government-controlled internet, energy, schools, and healthcare, and as a bonus, Reefer for everyone. Hey, all right, I'm not sure which candidate that is, but apparently it would be the Oprah of weed. You get Reefer, you get a blunt, you know, you get a joint. Everybody gets weed. Fantastic. Look under your chairs. There's weed. At least that's what Marco Rubio wants you to think. And really, that sounds kind of awesome. Now, as far as everything else, fabrications, right? But here's the thing. The government certainly can't do worse than what we have right now. Rising electric bills, climate change, healthcare that is completely unaffordable for the average family, an internet bill that is so riddled with fees and weird costs that you have to have someone to come and interpret it for you so you know actually what the hell you're paying for. But, you know, again, in reality, nobody's saying government takeover of any of these industries. What they are saying is that, hey, why don't we have government-sponsored insurance under Medicare for All? Insurance. Now, look, there still will be some private insurance, but understand, private insurance will only exist for things that are not actually covered under Medicare for All, which leaves very small room, very, very small room for private insurance to cover those things that are not covered by Medicare for All, which is super comprehensive. And by the way, when you get into the details of, you know, negotiating for what is going to be covered under Medicare for All, if they actually decide to take up the bill in Congress, then, you know, some things might be allowed to be covered by private insurance, and some things might not. And so it all kind of depends on how the final bill kind of gets hashed out. But there's no nuance allowed in Marco Rubio's world, because everything that is, you know, any good that's for the public is immediately socialism, communism. So now, as far as free weed goes, getting back to that, right? No free weed. Sorry, guys. Sad. But Bernie Sanders does say, why don't we legalize it? So that we no longer, of course, lock people up for possession of marijuana or using marijuana. And by the way, that would also mean taking marijuana off, or cannabis, whatever you want to call it, taking that off the Schedule 1 list of drugs. Schedule 1 means that there is absolutely no redeeming value in this drug, right? And that it is as dangerous as heroin. Now, any of you who have smoked marijuana or had an edible or used marijuana in any way, or cannabis, even without the psychoactive components of it, you would know that it is not as dangerous as heroin. It's actually less dangerous than alcohol to consume. And so it's ridiculous. So any serious presidential candidate should be like, yes, let's at the very least decriminalize it, if not legalize it outright. And that's, of course, apparently a punchline from Little Marco. So naturally, something got roasted online, and it's Marco Rubio. So now let's start with actor Dietrich Bader, which, by the way, I remember him from the Drew Carey Show. He just responded with, awesome. Can't be any more clear than that. Tiffany Bridge is reminded of the taco trucks. Remember the taco trucks? They're supposed to be on every corner if Hillary Clinton won. That sounds kind of awesome. Imagine combining free weed and taco trucks. Oh my God. Amazing. Again, what's free weed without tacos, right? I mean, you're practically making me want to go out and vote right now. And by the way, I would if I could early voting, but I'm not sure when early voting starts here in Michigan. But Rat King, which is great, says, "Is this supposed to be a negative?" Good question. Mike just says, "Saying Reefer for everyone makes you even more of a square than Ted Cruz or Ben Sass." Oh, look, you know, it is pretty funny. It kind of tangentially related, but not to Marco Rubio. But I think I figured out who the Ted Cruz is on the Democratic side. It's Pete Buttigieg. The smarminess, right? There are certain parallels, right? Now, look, I know that Ted Cruz is basically a melted candle wax figurine, but Pete Buttigieg is, if you haven't melted that candle, completely empty, devoid of any real substance, and burns easily, or melts easily under pressure, or under any sort of heat. So, good parallels, right? But anyway, let's get back to the tweets. JD Wallace, again, is reminded by the taco trucks, and then adds, "Sign me up." David Wilson Brown asks, "You are so bad at this. How are you even a senator?" Answer, old people in Florida. Just saying. Now, Grant Stern says, and points out, by the way, 70% of Floridians actually voted for legal weed in 2016, 25% more than either presidential nominee. Interesting. Amy says, "Hell yeah, thanks, government." Can't wait. And Brutalism Apologist, with my favorite comment, says, "Don't threaten me with a good time." Look, how out of touch are these Republicans like Marco Rubio? Look, Rubio's supposed to be young. He's supposed to be the fresh face of the party. And yet he talks like he's going to a retirement home. Oh, but that's basically what Florida essentially is, a large retirement community. Let's be honest. Come on. All right. Anyway, let's move on. Let's go to the debate. All right. During the South Carolina debate, a lot of viewers noticed that there was a lot of enthusiasm for one candidate in particular, and it's generally not the candidate that has traditionally seen enthusiasm from the crowds. That person being, of course, Michael Bloomberg. Kind of shocking, since, of course, you and I, we all watched the last debate, and he is essentially got destroyed, dismantled, mostly by Elizabeth Warren, but by many of the other candidates as well. And so that happened in Nevada. And following that, of course, Michael Bloomberg has seen his poll numbers decrease. Yet, for some reason, the crowd in South Carolina was very, very pro-Bloomberg and had booed Bernie Sanders. That's super weird. So a lot of people were kind of wondering, hey, wait a minute, what is going on here? Why is the crowd so hostile to Bernie and so pro-Bloomberg? Well, I mean, ask and you shall receive, which I did on Twitter. And sure enough, now we know the answer. It's that he's essentially bought the crowd. According to local news station WCSC-TV, tickets for the debate audience ranged between $1,750 to $3,200. So it's almost $2,000 for nosebleed seats and up to $3,000. Really? Not only that, but the Charleston County Democratic Party website noted that the only guaranteed way to get a ticket is to become a sponsor of the debate by paying, of course, these outrageous ticket prices. Now, look, I don't know about you guys. I would hazard a guess that, like me, you really can't afford that. That's just about what I make in a month to afford one of these tickets. And again, that is not something like going and spending that kind of money to go and sit in a debate audience is not what regular, normal working class people do. Just saying. But you know who can do that? Who can afford it? Rich people, insiders, right? Democratic Party insiders, to be specific. Generally, both of those groups, as I've seen from experience, tend to not be in favor of somebody like Bernie Sanders. They even, by the way, and to add more fuel, right, to the idea that is taken off, that Bloomberg has bought this crowd. Remember that it's not just going against Bernie Sanders, but that same crowd booed Elizabeth Warren for calling Bloomberg out on his taxes and talking about the sexual harassment charges against Bloomberg, right, or allegations, and the woman who claimed pregnancy discrimination. All those elicited boos. But the naked Texas cowboy or whatever, the supposed joke by Bloomberg, claps, applause, and laughter. Could it be more obvious that he literally bought off the crowd? I mean, there seems to be no other explanation to that. Either he is paid off the crowd, or that same crowd has the class concerns of someone like Michael Bloomberg. In fact, here's the thing. The DNC was in charge of distributing, if I have this correctly, about 1/3 of the tickets. The Charleston Democratic Party in charge of the others. And I believe the rest was on sale. So, dude. Now, again, this did not go unnoticed. Primary voter Peter Davis told WCSC that the debate should be more accessible to grassroots Democrats. You know, regular working people that should supposedly be making up the base of the Democratic Party, and actually do, but are not represented by the party. He says, quote, "At the end of the day, it's still a money game. Whoever has the most gets to attend these kinds of events that should be public and should be easily accessible." Yeah. And that is the problem here. These debates are not accessible to the working class, to regular people. And by the way, it wasn't just a stacked audience that was troubling. If you were watching live on CBS, you might have noticed that during the breaks, the commercial breaks, they ran ads from Michael Bloomberg. Yeah. So that happened as well. Now, that outraged people that were watching. One New Yorker writer, Tad Friend, says or asks, what kind of rule allows the candidates to advertise during the debate? Or did Bloomberg just buy CBS? Another Bernie Sanders volunteer asks, okay, why the hell is there a Bloomberg ad on during the debate? How is this not a campaign finance law violation? Maybe it should be. But apparently CBS, I mean, the whole debate format was a disaster. The moderators had no control over the debate, and you had a stacked audience with Bloomberg ads. And not only that, but I had a lot of Big Pharma and anti-Medicare for all ads where I was watching. I mean, how is that allowed during a debate? And by the way, Michael Bloomberg was the only person who'd be able to afford to, buy not only Super Bowl ads, right, but ads during these debates. He spent over $500 million on blanketing the airwaves with his message. And his message is, of course, Bernie bad, I can beat Trump, and look at how how everybody who's worked under me absolutely loves me. Okay, then. Okay. Now, I want to bring out a couple of tweets here. Beth Purity Test Enthusiast says the entire clown carnival of last night's debate, from tickets going from $17 to $3,200 to Bloomberg buying ads to the moderators having no control or asking zero questions about climate change, was a gross display of money destroying our democracy. And it spawned, by the way, the hashtag WineCaveDebate. I'm not sure, but I believe Kyle Kalinske might have started that hashtag. Again, I might be mistaken on that, but certainly was instrumental in getting it to trend. And look, that's what it is. Wine Cave Debate. Couldn't put it any clearer. Florida for Bernie says the average American can't afford a $400 emergency. DNC, hey, want to be part of our live studio audience for the debate? Choose your seat, $1,750 to $3,000. And Angry About You says hearing people cheer billionaires is a really bad look for a party that pretends to care about the working class. Exactly. Now, not only, of course, did social media weigh in, but you also had one of the candidates, Senator Bernie Sanders, the only one who actually complained about this, well, let me show you the video, and then I'll get to my thoughts on the rest.
Do you know how much money it costs to get a ticket down below?
How much?
I read that it costs $1,750. So to get a ticket to the debate, you have to be fairly wealthy. Most working people that I know don't spend $1,700 to get a ticket to a debate, and that's problematic. But, people, that's what the DNC did.
So that's Bernie Sanders talking about the ticket prices. Now, did you hear any other candidate talking about that? How there's no access? No, I can understand Biden ignoring it because that's the way it's always been. But Elizabeth Warren, where are you? Why aren't you talking about the stacked debate? Why aren't you talking about the ticket prices? She also got booed. Why is she not bringing this up? That's a curious question. Very curious. Now, a Bloomberg source, of course, comes out later and says, oh, no, Biden, the debate audience, no, you guys are crazy. They said that each campaign was allotted the same number of tickets by the DNC. The DNC. The totally impartial DNC. Right. They also denied allegations that members of the audience had received money. And look, to be fair, we cannot prove that they did receive money, at least for now. We can, however, prove that Bloomberg had bought ads that played during the debate. That is deeply problematic. Now, there are people defending Bloomberg and defending this entire thing. The whole idea that, hey, man, look, you should be able to go and sell these tickets to these debates for $1,750 to $3,000, and Bernie shouldn't be complaining about it. And they're also saying that the people that aren't complaining about it, you Bernie bros, you're just coming up with conspiracies. Oh, so, okay, rich people being able to get into the debate crowd, that's bad. It's like, that's fine. And, if you're rich, you should totally be able to buy a ticket to get a chance to boo at Bernie Sanders. Now, thankfully, this didn't have much of an impact on who actually won the debate, with a lot of people still saying Bernie Sanders hung onto the lead, which is good, but nonetheless, what's more worrisome here, I think in the long run, is the fact that there are people in the party that don't care about a racist, sexist billionaire not only buying his way into the race and into the debates and had the rules changed for him after donations, and then has decided he wanted to advertise during those debates and allegedly pay off audience members to be on his side, and or at least stacking them full of his own supporters so that it's unrepresentative of the actual electorate. Well, I mean, look, that is deeply problematic. I mean, imagine if Bernie Sanders did that. I mean, you better believe that it would be massive, massive outrage. But the whole point of Michael Bloomberg's campaign is to stop Bernie Sanders, and more importantly, his army of working class supporters from taking back the party from the moneyed elites. Okay. One more debate related story. And it's just, again, more fun here. Let's dunk on Jennifer Rubin. All right. Conservative Washington Post columnist Jennifer Rubin is getting dunked on for her thoughts about Bernie's debate performance in the South Carolina Democratic debate. So now she tweeted out, Bernie now digging his grave, blaming America for overthrowing governments. So that's just one of many negative tweets. And of course, look, you go in her, she's always trashing Bernie Sanders. It's not exactly news. But it is interesting that Rubin, again, somebody who works for the Washington Post, is now saying, oh, Bernie's done. I can't believe he would blame America for overthrowing other governments. Wait, are you saying that we haven't? I mean, because we have. we literally have overthrown other governments. Iran comes to mind, where the CIA overthrew the government because they dared to try to nationalize their oil industry and put a puppet government, the Shah, who then was overthrown by the people. And now that's why we have the situation we have with Iran. That's why they have a fundamentalist government, because we tried to overthrow theirs. Not to mention the numerous other places we have overthrown governments. In fact, in South America, there's not a leftist government that we haven't tried to topple. And Jennifer Rubin is going on and saying, how dare you blame the United States, blame America for our disastrous foreign policy, for things that we have actually done. I mean, she has no self-awareness or any awareness, or maybe she just thinks, oh, no, if it's a leftist leader, we totally have to overthrow it. I mean, suffice to say, that got a lot of pushback here. Aisha Sharna says, lady, go read books. Because, they have like information in them and facts and things that you can look up. But then again, she probably already knows the facts and doesn't care. Dave Zirin says, this tweet is performance art. Someone framed this. Well, look, this tweet's going to live on the internet, especially now that I'm talking about it. Because it is important, right? Will Bunch says, you want leaders to pretend that didn't happen? Name can't be blank says, please log off, read a history book. Ryan Doherty points out some of the governments America has overthrown. Guatemala, 1954. The Congo, 1960. The Dominican Republic, 1961. South Vietnam in 1963. Brazil in 1964. Chile, 1973. And those are just some of the governments that we have overthrown. Detachment Red says, what do you think we did during the Iraq War, which you happily supported? That is also important. Yes. And so now, instead of calling it, overthrowing governments, now we call it regime change. Basically the same thing. We did regime change in Iraq, and look how that turned out. We also assisted with the regime change in Libya. They now have open air slave markets. Congratulations. We also did that with attempted to do that in Honduras. Or actually, I think we were successful in Honduras, which is disastrous. Absolutely disastrous. There's a coup. And so, look, we have a terrible history with our foreign policy in trying to overthrow and actually overthrowing mainly leftist governments. To ignore that history is to ignore the amount of suffering our foreign policy has caused. And not only that, but the effects that has now on the world. And it's not like it doesn't have effects. I mean, for example, what we did in Iraq paved the way for ISIS. Just saying. So, but there's more. There's more. And Actus Magus, by the way, in the tweet or in the chat says, This year, Trump voiced support for the coup in Bolivia. That is true. Was our Bolsonaro? No, sorry, that's Brazil. But yes, there was also a right-wing takeover in, like I said, Brazil with Bolsonaro. Evo Morales in Bolivia getting overthrown, the coup there. And so there was also an attempted coup in, what was it? Another South American country, Venezuela, where the Trump administration was more than happy to support the basically opposition to Maduro. I mean, again, here we are in favor of inserting ourselves into other countries to overthrow their leaders. And people like Jennifer Rubin would say, yes, absolutely. That's what we're doing. More tweets here. Lena says they didn't overthrow themselves, Jennifer. JSB adds, we literally did, Jennifer. And Nicola adds, if stating facts is digging your grave, you're going to live forever. Indeed. Jennifer Rubin is such a hack writer. But interestingly enough, or sadly enough, her takes have been welcomed by many in the resistance, right? Only because she is anti-Trump. So she thinks, oh no, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to basically get myself ingratiated with the Democratic establishment, and I'm going to tell them what people that they can pick to be president. Now, who is she against? Bernie Sanders. She's virulently anti-Bernie. And so these ex-Republicans or Republicans that are never Trumpers, they have basically, tried to take and tell Democrats who they should nominate. And instead of fixing their, fascist trash party, they come over and make sure the Democratic Party stays right wing. And because that's essentially where we are, to prevent us from going back to the left, I guess. And here's the issue, right? With Jennifer Rubin and people like Rick Wilson, and again, a lot of these ex-Republicans, they agree with Trump on the policy, right? But what they want is just a nicer face. Trump is too rude. He's saying the quiet parts out loud. He's embarrassing them one tweet at a time and basically ripping the mask off what is grotesque right-wing policies. Again, like foreign policy, like regime change, okay? And more tax cuts for the rich that destroy the economy, et cetera, deregulation that destroys the environment, waterways, all this stuff. Republicans like Jennifer Rubin, they're like, oh yeah, we love this. Even some of the immigration stuff. But again, they want a polite fascism. They want a nice face put on all of these horrendous policies, right? And so instead of, supporting that openly, because that, again, is embarrassing, they're going to go over to the Democratic Party and say, well, we need to have somebody who is a polite fascist. I know, maybe somebody like a Michael Bloomberg, who was a Republican, just like me. And so we agree on the issues. And so what we're going to do is we're going to just support that. And how dare Bernie Sanders come in with his actual left-wing populism? Oh, no, we can't have that. And so every terrible take from the Washington Post, almost every terrible take from the Washington Post, has come from hacks like Jennifer Rubin. And so I don't understand why they think at all that their opinion should have any weight among Democratic voters. I mean, they think that they might be having an effect, but actually they don't. Bernie Sanders is one of the most popular politicians in the country. He's one of the most popular Democratic politicians, for sure. And people like his policies. And moreover, polls show that Bernie Sanders, most Democrats believe that he can beat Donald Trump. And so, sadly for the Jennifer Rubins of the world, their advice is getting ignored despite those angry tweets. Okay. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a break. I'm going to come back in a couple of minutes. I'm going to thank some members and some patrons, and then we'll go on. We got more stories here, including scary charts. You're not going to want to miss that story. And then Joe Biden caught line again. So stay right here. Please like and share the stream. Super chats are welcome. And I'll be back in a couple of minutes. Round the nation.
This is an island surrounded by water, big water, ocean water. Trust me, I'm like a smart person. I'm very consistent. I'm a very stable genius. I had the best words. Tolerated. I know words. Mike Pounds. I hope they now go and take a look at the oranges of the investigation. But there's no better word than stupid. Anonymous, really anonymous. I'm very highly educated. One of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water. I had the best words. God bless the United States. Why? You're getting nervous, man.
This day, 30 years ago,
Yeah, I just did that entire thing muted. I realized that. Okay. Anyway, so we are actually back. Thank you guys. Let me give some super chats here. First, David Richardson says, "What happened in the South Carolina debate? Uh, looks like a blatant, cynical attempt to derail Bernie after the BS in Iowa and New Hampshire, and he's slaughtering Nevada." Yes. So no, that's great. Sierra, thank you. I'm aware now. Oops, technical issues. All right. Anyway, let's thank some channel members here. I want to thank Veronica Wicker and Brandy Cruz. So thank you for supporting us. That's through our channel memberships. You can become a channel member by hitting the join button below. And then, of course, Patreon. I want to thank Raven Surrett and Joseph. Patreon.com/Q80Nation. That's how you can support independent progressive media. Okay. Anyway, let's actually move on here. All right. I know, right? Okay. We're doing it live here, folks. Do it live. All right. Very serious story. Very serious. Okay. Working class Americans can no longer afford to take care of their families. Now, this is according to a new report published by a conservative think tank. Now, that's interesting considering the source. Now, it is the Manhattan Institute, and again, it is described as a conservative think tank. And what they did is that they did a cost of thriving index, right? And what they found was pretty disastrous. They found that the median male U.S. worker now has to earn over a year's salary in order to afford the annual expenses of a family of four. So understand, put it plainly, right? In order to afford stuff for a year, you have to work more than a year just to get by. Wait, that's not right. No, you heard it. You heard it correctly. I read it correctly. The report, their lead author, Orrin Cass, explains that in 1985, the typical male worker needed about 30 weeks of pay to afford the $13,227 required for a family of four's major living costs: housing, healthcare, transportation, and education. Oh God, if it only still costs $13,000, which it does not, as the report goes into. In 2018, those expenditures have risen to $54,441, and the typical male has to work 53 weeks in order to get there. There is a nice little handy chart that goes along with this, and I want to show you that. So here we have the median wage for a full-time, 40 hours a week male worker. So you can see they're doing pretty good in 1985, 1990, 1995. And then you see, of course, the cost of college continue to go up. The cost of healthcare, health insurance continuing to go up, and housing. Although when you look at the health insurance portion, that is really troubling. So you can see that huge increase in that health insurance. And of course, it's one of our major problems that we have in the United States right now. So again, those colored portions represent the four key living costs of middle-class life for a family of four. And they add up, of course, the cost of thriving. So again, the male worker doing not so good. So the index looked at the data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, right? Estimates for the median usual weekly earnings of men over 25 who are employed full-time wage and salary workers. So understand, we're not just talking about part-time workers here, right? This are men working 40 hours a week. They're busting their asses, right? They're doing what they can to take care of their family, and it's just not working out. Now, a lot of you might be asking, why is the focus on the men? where are the women in this? Well, women are involved in this study, and for them, it's actually far, far worse. So let me get to how they fare. Now, Cass's findings for a female breadwinner found that in 1985, women needed to work 45 weeks to afford the 4 annual expenses. Now, again, that is compared to the male back in 1985 only had to work 30 weeks in order to, out of the year, in order to afford the basic necessities, right? Women had to do 45 weeks. So that represents, of course, the fact that they don't get paid as much as their male counterparts, even for some of the same jobs. And that's the wage gap that we're talking about, right? But even so, they were still able to do it. However, in 2018, it would now take a woman 66 weeks in 2018 to afford to take care of her family. And let me show you that graph here, just in case a visual aid helps. So that's the male. And here's the female. 1995, actually in the mid 90s, early 90s, it started going underwater already. Again, you have got those same increases in both the cost of college, the cost of housing. Transportation seems relatively stable, growing only a little bit, but you have that giant increase in health insurance. Wow. No one, again, both sexes, women doing far worse than their male counterparts, are below the cost of thriving as measured by this conservative think tank, right? So that means that a single earner household is now impossible. Just impossible. Now, that, of course, has other consequences, right? Like the need, for example, of affordable childcare for both parents can work. However, I do believe that that parents should have the choice of being able to either have one of them, whether it be the male or the mother or the father, staying home to be with the kids, or have both of them, if they want to work, be able to do so and still have affordable childcare. And so I think there needs to be, in order to make that happen, affordable childcare, but also higher wages, and even something like a UBI would help out greatly, if done in the right way, of course, where it doesn't eliminate other forms of government assistance. Okay, and so all these things would help. Basically, the whole point here is maybe we shouldn't punish Americans for having families, and also boost wages, benefits, guarantee healthcare, etc. And right now, that's not happening, and people are falling behind, especially the younger generations. The study noted that those between 25 and 34 have only seen a $29 income increase since 1974 when adjusted for inflation. So the incomes of people between 25 and 34, millennials, right? Sort of on the younger end of millennials, they've only seen an increase of $29. That's it. Since 1974. That's insane. Adults aged 35 to 44, however, have made nearly $2,900 more in 2017 than their 1974 counterparts did, while those aged 45 to 54 saw an increase in their income of nearly $5,400 over that same time period, adjusted for inflation. So understand, the older you are, the better you seem to be doing. Weirdly enough. Now, again, that's not universal, obviously. But more importantly, okay, what I'm trying to get around to is that younger people can't make it. While many in the older generations, and certainly not everyone, have done a little bit better. But you know who's done the best? the top 1%, who have gained so much of the income since 1974. So it's a disaster for so many. But it is worse for younger people, especially women, and even more so if you're a young Black woman or a Hispanic woman. That's just doubly worse. And they didn't even look at race in this study. They just looked at male, female, and age. Okay. So now, look, you got college tuition, by the way. One of the reasons, and I pointed that out, college and health insurance were the big drivers of why people are falling behind. And not only that, but stagnant wages too. But you have, amazing stat here, right? You had the cost of attending a 4-year university has increased 8 times more than wages have since the 1980s. 8 times. Stagnant wages. And actually, we've lost wages since the 1970s. The money is worth less than it was, adjusted for inflation. We have less wealth, right? But more expenses. And look, the average student loan debt for a student who took out loans and graduated in 2018 was about $29,800. Again, that is a really expensive. Now, housing is another part of that. Housing sales, the price of houses has increased by 39% since the 1970s. Healthcare costs, getting to that. Per capita, per person, right? The cost of healthcare has increased by $9,000 in the same time frame. Whereas if you're 18 to 34, right, you've gained a $29 increase in your wages, but your healthcare costs have gone up by $9,000. Jesus. That, by the way, this is double. What we pay here in America for healthcare, health insurance, is actually double what citizens pay in Canada for their single-payer universal healthcare system. That's why we need Medicare for all. But what more evidence do you need for to understand that the system is broken? Even conservative think tanks are looking at this and they're like, man, that is bad. This is pretty terrible. But most of you watching, I'm sure you already know this. I think a lot of you are living it. This is more, this segment is actually more for people who are comfortable, right? Who don't understand why young people are so angry and won't accept the status quo. Who are not, looking at a return to normalcy after Donald Trump. This is for people who don't understand why Bernie Sanders always yells, why he's so angry, and why he's winning young people, and why there's so much passion for him. It's because we are literally a lost generation of people who, no matter how hard we work, again, these people are working 40-hour jobs, both salaried and hourly employees, and we still can't survive on one income alone. Not like you used to back in the 1970s and 1980s. We can't do it. This is a generation who has done everything that we were told that would allow us to be more successful than our parents. And yet, we are the first generation to actually end up being worse off than our parents. The numbers don't lie. We need change, and we need it now. And this is why. Couldn't be more clear. Okay. One more here. Let's go to the Biden story. The campaign of Vice President Joe Biden has just admitted that he was being less than honest about his visit to South Africa to see Nelson Mandela. Now, Biden's 2020 campaign has come out to say that the former vice president was actually not arrested for trying to visit Nelson Mandela at a South African prison during apartheid. That's after Biden used that or had claimed that at least 3 times in the run-up to South Carolina. In fact, I want to give you some of that speech. Take a look.
Nelson Mandela walked out of prison and entered into discussions about apartheid. I had the great honor of meeting him. I had the great honor of being arrested with our UN ambassador on the streets of Soweto trying to get to see him on Robben's Island. When he came to the United States, when he came to the White House, to the Senate, I was chairman of the committee, and he walked in, and most incredible thing I've ever felt in my life. He walked across in that private room with the big table we have in the executive room, and he walked over, and I said, Mr. President, he leaned, I said, thank you.
Okay, so, wow. That was Joe Biden. Now, in multiple campaign visits to Nevada and South Carolina, Biden made those same comments, right? Those same claims, despite having no publicly available evidence of it. Meaning it never happened. He made it up. Now, the New York Times and the Washington Post, people who would arguably be more on Biden's side, also looked into it, and they're like, yeah, we don't have any sort of evidence to support that story. No, he did not get arrested. Now, this, not only that, but this was not even mentioned in Biden's 2007 memoir. You think that getting arrested with Nelson Mandela would be something that you would put in your memoirs, right? Like, oh man, remember that time I got arrested with Nelson Mandela? That was kind of awesome, also terrible. But hey, it was awesome. And look at me fighting against apartheid with one of the greats. Well, again, it didn't really happen. So, look, I don't know if he's. I'm not even sure what's going on. Is he lying? Yes, but maybe his brain's also melting. I don't know what's going on with Joe Biden. But again, this isn't the first time he's lied about something, to be fair. And it's not a good look, right? Now, not only did Biden not get arrested when he was in South Africa, but it wouldn't even make sense for him to have gotten arrested in the first place. Like, what did he do? And the whole story doesn't make sense because the city of Soweto is hundreds of miles away from the island where Mandela was. So, I mean, getting arrested to go and see Mandela when you are nowhere near Mandela makes no sense. Makes no sense. So now the campaign comes back and says, oh, yeah, okay, look, that didn't happen. Here's what actually happened. He was separated from a congressional delegation at an airport. Well, that is a far cry from getting arrested. I'm just saying, right? Now, this is Kate Bedingfield, Biden's communication director, who told reporters on Wednesday that, oh, look, he was separated, right? Quote, he took a trip with the congressional delegation back in the 1970s. He was separated from the Congressional Black Caucus, members as he was traveling with at the airport when he landed. So the whole thing was, since they were undergoing apartheid, they had black doors and white doors. And so in order to go through the black doors, obviously, it was only like black people had to go through the black doors. White people had to go through the white doors. So Biden, not a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, obviously, separated from the group to go through the white door. And that, I mean, that's already terrible, right? So that is the damage of apartheid. Separate is never equal, right? And so if you just tell that story, like, hey, I went to South Africa, we wanted to visit Nelson Mandela to, talk about his imprisonment and to really fight against this evil of apartheid. And when I was there, I had to be separated from my delegation because they were black, I was white. And there firsthand, I could see the pain in the faces of those that I traveled with being segregated and separated. And it just makes me, just think about just the horrors that normal everyday Black people go through in this terrible racist system that is set up here in South Africa. That would have actually been a very powerful story. But he didn't share that story. Why he felt compelled to lie about getting arrested. I mean, ridiculous. All right, so now, more details on Biden back in the 70s, right? And they're not good. In fact, when he was in the 70s, instead of getting arrested visiting Nelson Mandela, he was compromising with segregationists in America. Now, he actually did take a trip to South Africa, but also that's around the same time that he was supporting people like Strom Thurmond. Now, Biden legislatively led the charge in an issue that kept Black students segregated from white students in Delaware. Now, his legislative work against school integration, according to NBC News, advanced a more palatable version of the separate but equal doctrine and undermined the nation's short-lived efforts at educational equality, said legislative and education history experts. So, I mean, hey, it's the nicer version of apartheid here in America. Now, Biden also sponsored a bill limiting the Delaware court's power after it had ruled on the issue of busing. Now, they ruled in favor of using busing to integrate schools. Joe Biden said, I don't like the court's ruling, and I'm working on behalf, of course, white people, right? And so we don't like that. Strom Thurmond doesn't like that. And so I'm going to try to blunt the court's power so that we don't have to do busing. Not only did he support that bill, but he also added an amendment, right, to an appropriations bill that barred the federal government from withholding funding from schools that remained segregated. That amendment went beyond busing, by the way, affecting school systems that effectively separated students by race, whether or not they used busing. That is disastrous, but that is his record. Not only did he lie about the arrest, but also about Mandela personally thanking him for getting arrested, because again, it never actually happened. Now, Ms. Bedingfield could only say that Mandela had thanked the former vice president for his anti-apartheid work, more broadly, but not in any specific incident. And so, look, Biden, he actually did fight against issues of apartheid, but he was also doing something similar at home in fighting for separate but equal and to keep these schools segregated. At least maybe, to be the most kind to him, saying, well, I don't agree with the way that they did it, but I agree with the goal. And so I was against the way that they did it, again, to be super, super kind, right? Now, as for the supposed arrest, right, getting back to that, Biden's communication director was clear that the incident should be referred to as separation. Now, the U.S. ambassador to the UN from 1977 to 79 was also there, right? And it was claimed that he also got arrested with Biden. He said, I don't recall being arrested. I was never arrested, and I don't think he was either, Mr. Young told the New York Times. I don't think there's ever a situation where congressmen were arrested in South Africa. Jesus, man. I mean, really? Is there any wonder why Joe Biden continues to lose every primary contest he's ever been in? I mean, seriously. Every time somebody, all they have to do is just look up the past, look up actual records. We have the internet now, and Biden, for whatever reason, still thinks that it doesn't exist. That you can't just go and look up actual information and say, hey, wait a minute, I think you're lying about this. No kidding. And look, his record on race is mixed at best. But that's not even the worst part. Is he's going around lying about it. And yet, this is a man who just today got the endorsement of Jim Clyburn. Now, Jim Clyburn is a very important figure in South Carolina, a very important civil rights icon. And yet, Clyburn gives his endorsement to Joe Biden, saying, I know Joe Biden. Well, if you knew Joe Biden, then surely you would know about this. I think Clyburn should know better because, and I'm not saying Clyburn should endorse Bernie Sanders, right? No, I'm saying that maybe he should know this kind of stuff. And maybe he does, and maybe he's forgiven, and maybe he's a better person than I am. Maybe I have no doubt. But I don't know. I guess people who have my respect, by the way, Jim Clyburn is somebody worthy of respect for, what he's been doing to fight for racial justice. But even those people who have done great and wonderful things can still do things that make, to me, at least no sense. I don't know. All right. Anyway, thank you for going around the nation with me today. Thank you for putting up with the tech problems or human error earlier today. Thank you for all that. The super chats, becoming patrons, patreon.com/TYT Nation. Sign up. You can help independent progressive media. Just thank you for watching. All right. Thank you guys. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you guys tomorrow.